Well, welcome to a new Harry's Garage, and today's car is the Jaguar XE Project 8 you see behind me. Now, some of you might know I've been an outside advisor at Jaguar Land Rover SVO for nearly 5 years now. I sort of got to know the team well there. And this particular example is what they call a pre-production car, and it's brand spanking new. It dropped off the line on Friday. Today is Sunday. I've had it for the weekend. It's so new that it should actually say prototype on it, but there wasn't time to put the stickers on it or get those on Monday, and then it's charging off into Germany for a customer event. But I thought this is a great opportunity to show you around this car, to show you some of the details that make it pretty special. And I have a bit of another interest in this car because I've bought one, and mine will be arriving in July. So this is like just a preview to this pretty special model, this 200-mile-an-hour Jaguar. Let's go and have a closer look. So Project 8 is this limited run Jaguar. It follows on from the Project 7 that was first shown in production for in 2014. My car is from 2015. I can't believe it's now 3 years old, and this is the follow-up from that, the Project 8, with 600 horsepower supercharged V8, a higher rated version than in Project 7, and in the smallest car Jaguar makes, the Jaguar XE. To transmit the power, it was just immediately had to be four-wheel drive, and then to really have a crack at this Nürburgring record, which it managed to do for four-door saloons, it got a wider track. It was 24mm wider at the front, and then 73mm wider at the rear, which is a huge amount. And because of that, everything had to change. The carbon brakes went in as well, but the wide track involved a huge number of body changes, and the only bits that remain the same as a standard XE are the front doors and the roof. Everything else is changed. The front, the big change are the carbon disc, the obvious change. It's 400mm carbon disc, CCB material rather than CCM material on the Project 7, another grade up. That involved getting that size 20-inch wheel in. That involved the headlight had to be moved forward, and the whole front end, everything you're looking at the front, the front fenders, that front wing, the bonnet, they're all made out of carbon and utterly bespoke to Project 8. The rear, the 73mm wider track meant the door had to be flared as well as the body. Crazy expense to do that for a 300 off car, and then these dramatic cutouts here, which are an extremely good way to extract hot air from the rear air vents. I'm told by the engineers it's actually more efficient to extract that way, create a vacuum there, than to try and duct air in. And you can see the same effect at the front. And then to the full ground effect, then you get this wider, much wider rear sill extension running along there, and then at the rear we have the spoiler mounted on the boot. And as a result, there's no mistaking this as a regular XE. Project 8 has a unique starts and those lozenge grills protecting the intercoolers, the air-to-water intercoolers down below, cooling the charge air. They have that sort of lozenge control, and that's actually demanded that the front end was made out of carbon fibre because you couldn't get these structurally strong enough here from making them from a plastic of some sort, so they had to be carbon fibre. Just has such a stance, and then there's this vent on the bonnet, very distinctive in carbon. That vents out hot air from the bonnet and also helps aerodynamic as you're approaching the 200-mile-an-hour top speed of this thing. Right, just have a look at this. If I open the rear door, you will see this particular example has just the two fixed seats in the back. This is known as the track version. This is basically a £10,000 option when you option the car. I've actually gone for rear seats because I just think it's more fun. This is actually it's a retainer for the belts. So you have full harness belts on this version, so it's not a full roll cage. You can see it doesn't actually touch the roof, but it's pretty trick, and it's meant to basically it's exactly the same. This is the version that actually set the Nürburgring record, this 7:21 time. It comes with fixed bucket seats that I'm finding very comfortable, and everybody else seems to as well. You adjust the height. If you're handy with Allen keys, you can adjust the height down there of the seat and get it set for you, and then you have just a mechanical slider. as it were. You can tell this is a prototype version. There's the big cut-off button. When it all goes horribly wrong, you punch that and it cuts all the electrics. And I've noticed a few of the body panels aren't quite right on the sill. They doesn't quite fit, and the rear petrol cap isn't quite right either. But anyway, we're going to pop the bonnet and just show you underneath there. First thing you notice on the bonnet, some of the lovely detail I like. There you see first signs of this pure carbon bonnet underneath, dressed here. This isn't quite finished right, but you just see there's the vent out. And there is the supercharged V8. Now normally this engine would have a cover on it, but at this rated horsepower they want to extract as much hot air as they can, so the cover's gone, because it just helps get rid of engine heat. Now this is a monster task trying to get this engine in here. What I find impressive is it's a 8-cylinder engine. They've only had a V6 the XE was meant to have, but the extra cylinder basically is fitted into the bulkhead. They had to do a bit more at the back and to make the weight distribution about right. I'm told with a 4-seater car it's 52 front, 48 rear, which is a pretty good result with a 5-litre supercharged V8 underneath. Everything's carbon. That's it. Unfortunately, it's the only bit you see. As I say, these are, but they come sort of ready painted in a grey primer, as does this, so you can't quite see it. Right, another thing I want to do now, I want to take a front wheel off and just show you suspension, because that's pretty tricky. So I'm going to take it outside. Okay. Yeah. Michelin cut 2 new technology tyres on this car, and that exposes this monster great disc. In a 6-pot aluminium calipers there, but what I want to show you is this. Oh, it's a lovely upright with the SV symbol on it there. The top link here, bespoke aluminium, and it's got shims in here so you can adjust the camber. This car carries 1.5 degrees of camber on the front as it comes out. Now there seems to be some confusion also on the track position of the suspension. You can add a 15mm drop. All cars, whether they're 2-seater with track pack or 4-seaters, come out with the same suspension setting ex-factory. And how you adjust it is on these dampers. Now these dampers are actually worth a mention. These Bilstein all aluminium motorsport dampers, they are thousands of pounds each. Huge cost. The only other sort of car you'll see them on the GT3 RS, current new one, has the dampers as well. So there we go, the red spring. I can't remember the poundage. I think it's £600. Really dramatically stiffer than the standard XE. Just up here, that is called a helper spring, and that's a much lower spring rate, and that's where the subtle ride comes from, because that is your initial ride as you're going down the road. That little spring is working, and then when the spring gets compressed in a compression, or when you're cornering, it basically goes solid, locks out, and then the big red spring comes into play. So if you want to drop your P8 to the track suspension system, you need to take the C-spanner out of the boot, which is one of these, and then with that you then move this upper collar around here. You compress the spring slightly like this, like that, and you'll see this then aluminium ring comes loose, and you basically take that out. You take this spacer out because the bottom spring platform is fixed. It has that grub screw into it. You take this aluminium out, and then you screw that back down, and so it sits on there once you've got the spacer out. I'm not going to do it because there's 4 wheels, and you can see it's a sort of garage job. It's a bit laborious, and then you get extra camera on the front, and you get the track position for your Project 8 to do the dynamite lap times. So the other bits you have to do if you get to track back is to extend the front splitter. There's some Allen keys out there, and then that extends 60mm. And then at the rear spoiler, that's got another position. That's a spanner job, and you just flick it up, and then it produces the 122 kilos of downforce, is 186. So there you go. It's a bit of a job to get it into the track spec for the suspension. I'm not going to bother now, so I'm going to bolt it all back together, put the wheel back on, and then we'll go for a drive. First thing you notice when you get into this one with track packs and the 2-seaters is you have to drop into the bucket seat, so no surprise there. 4 seats, similar seats, but they recline and they slide forward, and they're electric actually, so nice seats. You're met with a Jaguar XE interior, but it's been dressed obviously, and there's I can see some carbon running around there. There's a plaque there saying Jaguar, one of 300 signifying the 300 cars that are going to be built, Project 8. Select drive, I'm in dynamic now, so I have some nice sort of red dials in front of me and a picture of a Project 8 in the middle. And off you go. And typically with this 8-speed auto gearbox that we know from ZF, it all feels fairly normal at the moment. Steering already feels sort of slightly lighter than you expected, but there's lots of things to discover with this car. I can actually just hear now a noise that's reminiscent of my Countach. I can just hear a little bit of chatter from the back, because at the back the subframes both front and rear are solidly mounted, but there's rose joints at the back, and I can just hear a sort of different sound. It's sort of metal to metal that is so characteristic of rose joints. Used to have the same in my race Salon. Anyway, I'm going to make myself way out of the village. It's open guards today, so it's going to take a bit of a while. The next time you join me, we'll be just probably in Burford and then heading for my favourite bits of road. So see you later. We're just coming into Burford now, and even those first few miles, the one first surprise that we have with Project 8 is it rides okay. It's not a limo by any stretch of the imagination, but the initial bump isn't super agitating. You're not in a super rough riding car. Hats off to the chassis engineers on quite a few of these sort of track special cars, GT3 amongst them, how they've actually introduced a ride quality that was unimaginable before the variable dampers of today, and also those little helper springs. They have a part to play on this particular car, so that initial bump is just smoother than you expect. Another surprise is immediately the steering feels different to other Jaguars. Yeah, I have hardly driven the car at all in this test. I've actually done 300 miles in this car. My job was to put miles on it this weekend, and it's arrived 120 miles, and I expect to put another, well, I'd like to get it to 500 by the end of the weekend or something like that. And yeah, it's different to other Jaguars. The steering is that little element of lightness to it, beyond what you expect. It doesn't really vary. I think I'm going to introduce another surprise. There you go, stopping at the traffic lights. It's got stop go on it. Engineers have somehow managed it to get it off the really naughty step on the CO2, and I think it's 254 grams per kilometre of CO2, which puts it into the one below the really naughty boys in the upper box. Don't know how they manage a car like this, 600 horsepower V8 supercharged, to put in the mid band, but they have. Anyway, so it stop starts as you just saw then. That lightness of steering, what it actually in your mind when you feel it is this car, well, it actually feels lighter than you expect, and we'll get on to weight actually when we get into the more dynamic road, but that's your initial impression of this car. It feels quite light, feels quite lively, and fairly obviously, and it's quick on the brakes, it's instant on the brakes, so there is that you'll read that it has a weight of 1745 kilos, I think is the declared weight. They actually weighed this car before it came out to me, and it was about 10 or so kilos over that, but this has got it's got the wrong sills on it, which is going to drop some kilos there, so the team are very confident of hitting that weight. And it should be remembered that weight is full of fuel and with a washer bottle filled up as well. Actually, as I'm driving it now, because I've got half a tank, it's probably a bit lighter. I want to just take you through the driver aids as well, which you start off with what they term comfort. And in comfort mode, it's quite clever because the transmission four-wheel drive, as you remember, it then splits the power 30 front, 70 to the rear. You go to the softest throttle setting, dampers at most comfortable, and this is the mode when you're just drifting, you're on the phone and all that sort of thing. This is the mode to use. Next step up is dynamic. And now dynamic, big change there, is the throttle is quicker acting on the engine, but the main thing is the drive transmission now goes to 100% to the rear and only delivers power to the front when necessary. So quite a change. The surprise to me is when I select dynamic, I don't get the exhaust. If I want the exhaust open, I have to press a button. You only get that when I go to track. Go to track, and in front of me the dash has changed from red. I've gone to a single dial, track mode confirmed, and this has the most aggressive settings on gearbox, and steering weights up as well. Oddly, the throttle calms down a bit, because the engineers felt you want to be able to deliver the power, meter it out, and not have that initial shock of power as you just hit the throttle. So I was surprised at that. And the other nice thing about track, it's configurable, so I can go into the dash and I can change the damper settings, and I can just calm down the dampers perhaps if I want to use it more regularly. And it has a different gearbox, gear change as well in track. It actually cuts the power more abruptly, torque goes down, and then reinserts it more aggressively. So it's not actually the quickest gear change in track, but it feels it. It's boom, boom, we'll see in a moment. Right, let's put it back to dynamic. I get the two dials up. Also, this car's got head-up display as well. Right. Now then, see what this comes. This is in dynamic. I've gone to manual mode by sliding the throttle across. And here we go. This is what it excels at. The speed you can carry into bends with this thing is nuts. Suddenly we have a different animal when you really poke in this engine. Supercharged V8s, you know, they're a bit of a has-been really. Everything's sort of twin turbo V8 now, but boy is it an aggressive engine when it's wound out to 600 horsepower. This instant torque, instant response. I was driving a friend's latest RS4 last night, V6, super smooth, lovely howl to it, really delivers the horsepower as well, but there's a sort of softness to it, you goad it into action. Not so with this unit. This is NASCAR aggressive. If someone told you this car had an 8-litre lump up the front, highly tuned V8, normally aspirated, you'd believe them from where I'm sitting. And it gives this car a character that is unbelievable. I can't believe I'm in a Jaguar XE. It's so aggressive. And yet, I was drifting through Burford, it was just in auto mode, no problem at all. But in this mode, oh my good God, suddenly it becomes clear why this car achieved a 720 around the Nürburgring, because it just demolishes a road like this. I tell you, the car, I'll just calm it down before I get arrested, put it into drive. The car it most reminds me of is back in the Evo days, when you first got into an Evo 7 or Evo or an Impreza 22B or something. Suddenly it was this car that had four-wheel drive, all-wheel ability, all-weather ability, sort of low centre of gravity, and you could drive it right to the edge, and it never seemed to bite. You just weren't sure where its limits were. It was always higher limits than you. That's what this car feels like on the road. Unbelievable as I come up to a horse box. Yeah. I don't want to do a full road test on it because I'm so itching to get my car out as well. But it's just such an amazing car to enjoy over a weekend, this thing. So different, people say, well, what's the point? Why do they do a V8 Jaguar XE? It's done for a giggle. It's one of those cars that has no real purpose in life apart to entertain, and it does that very well. Okay, now I've selected track, and this is where the super aggressive gear change is coming in. So I had a standstill, I'm going to hoof off down here, and then you just get this crack and crack as the gear changes go in. And mighty acceleration, 3.3 to 60. Here we go. Yes, it gives gives you a little idea. You can't go full noise very long. Team was telling me yesterday they've just started figuring this car, and they're in the 7s to 100 miles an hour, 7.5-ish they reckon. The acceleration time they were most proud of was actually the 50 to 75 acceleration, which sounds a funny one, but it's I think it's 80 to 120 kilometers an hour, and that was 2.2 seconds in gear. I mean, monster quick in gear acceleration. There's one standout feature of this car. I don't think there is. I think there's quite a few, but the steering. It just rolls into the corner. It's a lovely weight, and it's lighter than you expect. And there is a stability to the way it turns in. As I say, this master squashes away. It has very special engine mounts on this car that made a big change. It has ceramic wheel bearings that you just say, well, so what, they last forever. They add another layer of precision. And altogether, with this calibration of steering, it is just a mighty car to punt. You just breathe information and you can take liberties with it. And power out and just rely on that clever transmission just to transmit the power to the front when required, and it is dynamically astonishing. But the steering, I was talking to David Pook, who's head of development, and I said, how did you get this? It's different to Jaguar. What did you benchmark? And he said, when I was doing the final calibration, he went off and drove a GT3 RS 4 litre. That was his reference point. He says, if I can get anywhere close to that, he thinks is one of the best hydraulically steered 911. That's what I wanted on P8, and that's a hell of a point to have as your reference point. But this has a lovely quality to it. Anyway, I don't want to do a full test today because I know my other cars is coming in a few weeks and I want to wait till then, but yeah, I've really enjoyed having this car over a weekend. Things that I'm finding is I wish it had a slightly bigger fuel tank. If you drive it like a loon, you're into the teens on MPG, so no real surprise there, but it's 63 litres and thereabouts in about 220 mile range. I'd like a bit more than that if I could. The left-hand drive bit, I don't mind left-hand drive personally, but especially when you're not changing gear. It adds as a collector. I always think, well, it opens me up to the world market. I'm not just right-hand drive market. But I could do with sort of, I love the little telltales you get in the mirror today of blind spot, and it isn't on this car. I quite like that. But what all that is just throwing that into the bin, just the way it drives and just the entertainment factor, and it's just breadth of ability. It's described as a sort of four-seater, four-door GT3. I don't know a better way of describing it. That's what it feels like. I mean, heroic. I thought I might keep my GT2 for track stuff. No, I think this car on track is just dynamite, and just the giggle factor that it's a Jaguar XE. If, you know, that's what my mum would think it was, but oh no. And I think today the characters of cars, they're sort of morphing. I think 911 is still super popular because of the flat six, Gallardo R8 with the V10, that howl, the V-tails from Ferrari, and this supercharged V8. Well, it's been around a while, but this is its finest moment. 600 horsepower, instant throttle response, and just makes this car a complete giggle. I mean, mega. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, keep watching, keep subscribing. I'm off to have a bit more fun while I've still got this car. See you later.